So there's one big reason why I've lost money on Pokemon cards in the past, and it all comes down to not researching the correct criteria. And I'm going to explain what I mean about all that in just a second, but there's a specific trap that most collectors fall into, and understanding this fundamentally reshapes the way you research Pokemon cards before you actually buy them. Now, I always find it funny when it comes to buying Pokemon cards because most people just dive in headfirst into buying them without doing any prior research. And maybe that's you. Maybe you've actually experienced this. It's really ironic, right? Because when it comes to purchasing Pokemon cards, people will happily spend $500 or $1,000 and not even think about it. And then they'll even send like 50 or 75 cards to get sent off to get graded. And they do that without researching anything and just by following hype trains. Literally, all it takes them is watching one YouTube video and they just see that someone's speaking about a certain card or something that's happening in the market and they just act straight away. And it's really strange because think about it, like if I've seen people do more research when buying a video game, which is like 1/10 of the price of some Pokemon cards. People spend way more time learning, researching, reading reviews, watching YouTube videos, scrolling Reddit, asking Discord communities around a purchase that's around 70 USD. Whereas when it comes to purchasing Pokemon cards or ripping booster packs, they're just writing that decision without any prior research. And that's really the trap of collectibles. And what I really want to get you thinking about in this video is how to do that research before you commit to buy any Pokemon cards. So the first area I want to speak about is understanding a Pokemon's relevance in the broader aspect. One of the most common areas people make mistakes is that they see hyped Pokemon cards, but they don't have a strong IP history or some heritage backing. Examples of this are something like the Solosis. So it got pumped up in price randomly. These are like meme cards, and what they tend to do is they spike super quick in price, but then they drop heavy. So for a Pokemon card to be successful, it does need to have some relevance within the franchise. And it's a big thing when it comes to Pokemon cards, and something that happens in every era, and no era is immune to this. What happens is certain meme cards or cards that are just trending at the moment, they start spiking in price, and a lot of people play the FOMO game where they're going, oh, I need to buy it because what's going to happen if I don't buy it right now, it's going to spike in price and I'm going to regret it later. But really, when you take the time to do this research, usually the Pokemon cards with a big IP backing or a big franchise history or something that connects to the video games, those Pokemon tend to be stronger in the long term. And if you can link that and make that distinction before you buy, you're in a much better decision. One thing I've found is the more research you do around Pokemon and the video games, the more you just learn about the lore in the world. Obviously, one of the best ways to do that is if you just play the video games and experience it all yourself. Though if you are a little bit time poor, but you're still really interested in Pokemon's history, you can learn about it all on my other channel called Philip's Trick Room. In a recent video, I looked at Generation 5 and I explained the history of Gen 5, and there's a specific reason why it changed Pokemon forever. You can see that video on Philip's Trick Room, find all the details to that channel in the video's description. The big issue is a lot of these hype trains, people don't do the research and they fall victim to it because they just buy straight away without thinking. The biggest mistakes that happen in this hobby are all newcomers because they just see prices going up in price. They hear that Pokemon cards are a good investment. It doesn't mean just because you can see articles that Pokemon cards go up in price and they're some crazy hot investment. You need to actually know what you're buying, and a lot of people make that mistake. It is very common, and that's why it's very important that when you are buying into this franchise or when you're buying Pokemon cards, please learn what you are doing and make sure that Pokemon cards have that heritage backing or that massive franchise fan demand. This is really common. You've got Pikachu, okay? That's the mascot of the franchise. You already have a bit of a green tick there. You've got other popular Pokemon like Lugia, Gengar, Lucario, Charizard. All these are Pokemon that people are familiar with, and they're just much more likely to be successful in the long term. It's like when you think of Dragon Ball cards, a lot of people in the Dragon Ball community are getting a little bit frustrated because they're like, hey, why do we always have a Gogeta card or a Vegeta card? We want some other characters to get top chase cards. But obviously Bandai know what they're doing. They know that the money is in when they make a Gogeta top chase card or a Vegeta top chase card because that's got the mainstream appeal. Same thing is when you're buying top chase cards or expensive cards, you do want to make sure it has mainstream appeal. There's a big difference about buying things for your personal collection that you really love yourself. But if you do buy those mainstream items, as much as it's boring to buy mainstream mainstream items, they do have the biggest buyer market available later down the line. The reason why researching your purchases is so important is because it helps you make more informed decisions, and Double Hollow has a variety of tools to assist, who are the sponsors of today's video. Now, Double Hollow is primarily a Pokemon marketplace to buy and sell Pokemon cards, and if you want to become a seller, I really recommend it as it has very competitive platform fees. So if you upgrade to the premium version, you do unlock the price forecast feature. Here you can click on a specific Pokemon card and it gathers data to give you a unique forecast of a Pokemon's future, plus a heap of other details. Another premium tool that I love is the pack value section. So a big issue here is knowing whether a booster pack is worth opening. Well, this actually calculates the expected value of what you're likely to pull and compares it to the price of the booster pack in the market. This is a really useful tool as you can just always be aware if a set's worth opening or if it's much better to be left kept sealed. Now, the more research you do, the more confidence you have when you purchase your Pokemon cards. And what's so great, if you do want to try out Double Hollow's premium features, you can use the code appearing on screen for a 30% discount off your first month. A massive thank you to Double Hollow supporting the channel. Now let's get back to this video. Now, one important area is also about understanding Nintendo and Pokemon gaming history. This is so big and it comes down to researching your collectibles. If you're new to the hobby or if you haven't learnt about Pokemon or you remember it as a kid and now you're interested in it, one of the biggest things you can do is understand Pokemon and especially Nintendo, because when you learn about Nintendo and Pokemon, you start being able to align the pieces of the puzzle. The big reason for this is because Pokemon TCG sets are all linked to the video games. Now, Pokemon's very unique because the video games pretty much drive everything. If you look at something like Dragon Ball's manga introduces everything, and then it gets released in the anime, and then the games, and then the TCG all follow that. Pokemon's very different because the video games introduce everything. The video games will introduce the new mechanics like Gigantamax or Terastallize or Mega Evolution, and then they start coming out in the TCG. So if you want to start predicting things and making linking points, the best way to do that is by checking out the video games. For example, if something happens in the future where Generation 8 is re-explored, whether that's a remake or a new Legends game and Gala is re-explored one time, that means Gigantamax is going to return. And just by something like that, it could also mean that Gigantamax Pokemon cards also start getting a bit of hype and momentum around them, because that's what happened previously with Mega Evolution. And things like that usually make a lot of sense. Or if there's a really popular character in the video games that also has an impact in the TCG. And when you learn about that, you can make some interesting connection points that definitely help in the long term. Keeping up to date with Pokemon cards can be very difficult, though my channel focuses on providing all that info in the one place. My name's Phil and I've been creating content around Pokemon cards and collectibles for a few years now. Honestly, having you subscribe would mean the world, plus it helps you stay in the loop with the changing market. Now, the next area is about graded cards, and the big one is, have you looked at the pop reports and have you looked at the gem rate chances? Now, for people who have been collecting for a while, this may seem really obvious, but I think it's incredibly important to explain this so you don't make this mistake. One important thing that you're looking at is not so much the pop reports, okay? I've spoken about this before. Some people have gotten upset with me about it, but to me, unless it's vintage, I think with modern, pop reports have lost much more meaning than they used to mean. Or if you look at the PSA 10 Moonbreon, or if you look at the PSA 10 Charizard from 151, these pop reports are off the charts. There is so much out there. It is unbelievable. But then when you look at Van Gogh Pika, it hasn't really made any impact on the price, even though it has one of the highest PSA 10 pop reports out of a lot of cards out there. If it's very in demand and it has a high PSA 10 pop report, that's still okay because there's a big buyer market. And also it does this kind of weird thing that happens that because collecting's become so mainstream and widespread, it almost becomes like a rite of passage to own something like that in your collection. It's like, oh yeah, sure, PSA 10 Moonbreon might have a crazy pop report, but if you're genuinely a collector of Pokemon cards, or if you really like it, people expect that you own one of these items. I'm not saying that you need to, but it's kind of like a thing or a mentality that's in this hobby. Now, another thing that's really important is gem rate chances. This this means the chance that a certain Pokemon card has to actually be returned as a PSA 10. The reason why this one's so important is because a lot of people buy the raw card of a card and think, oh, if I just send a few of these to get graded and they return PSA 10, they're gonna have huge gains. Something like the Magikarp from Paldea Evolved, which has something like a 17 or 18% chance to be returned as a PSA 10. People expect that, oh, if I just buy a few of these and send them to get PSA 10, that I'm gonna make some huge profit. It doesn't work like that. So before you even grade a card, you really do need to look at your gem rate chances. Now, the next area is artwork quality and collector appeal, along with the artist behind the card. So when looking at Pokemon cards, there's a lot of areas to focus on, though one of them is the artwork quality. And over time, we've seen that quality of the artwork can have real long-standing effects, and it makes it very desirable for years to come. And more importantly, it's all about the illustrator behind the card as well. Pokemon illustrators have become very well known over the years, and a lot of collectors tend to collect cards from certain illustrators. And by knowing and researching the illustrators, you can also understand some of the preferences of the market. It's really important because if you do this research and find out the Pokemon illustrators, and if there's a top chase card, you can research that illustrator and you can see what previous works have they done, or are they a new illustrator as well? That's a big thing to do because that gives you some good foresight in a card's desirability and how many people want to collect it and all those things as well. So a good example of this and a very loved illustrator at the moment is Shinji Kanda. So Shinji Kanda uses a very chaotic, almost horror-inspired style, and he creates a sense of unease with his artworks, but they're just magnificent cards to look at. And it's funny because even if people don't collect Pokemon cards, if I show them a Shinji Kanda artwork, they usually say, wow, that actually looks really cool. And that way, you know, if an illustrator is already having that effect on people, you can imagine what that does for even dedicated fans in the broader market of that card. Some of his most famous illustrations are Giratina V from Lost Origin, along with the Magikarp from Paldea Evolved. You can probably see how these two are very similar, though he's also illustrated the Roaring Moon from Prismatic Evolutions and the Oricorio special illustration rare from the Mega Charizard UPC. So just by doing that, you can already see, hey, maybe if there's a top chase card that's a Shinji Kanda artwork and you can see a lot of people love it, well, already you can start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. Another illustrator that has a huge following is Komiya. Now, his artworks are very whimsical and they have these like exaggerated proportions, very dreamlike, somewhat psychedelic, such as Brute Bonnet. Though what's really interesting about Komiya, even though he's really loved, his cards don't fetch the premiums like Shinji Kanda. Some of my personal favorites from Komiya are Baxcalibur from Paldea Evolved and the Drowsy from Scarlet and Violet base set, and even the Oricorio from Crown Zenith's really cool. Or even Akira Agawa. Her illustrations are just super cinematic, and Akira Agawa usually illustrates top chase cards in a set. But also she's made some of the most iconic Pokemon cards as well, along with the latest Darkrai special illustration rare from Pitch Black. So one illustrator I'm personally looking out for, and I believe that they have very strong future potential, is Dan Chow. So he's made some pretty sick artworks recently. He illustrated the Zekrom special illustration rare from Black Bolt, along with both the Mega Gengar SIR and the Mega Charizard X. But that's why it's so important to look into the illustrators and the artwork quality, because you can get a good long-term overview. Especially if an illustrator already has some amazing artworks in their early days, you can start already collecting them and maybe make a connection with that illustrator. It's a really fun way to collect. Now, the next area that's important is also the time of your purchase for a particular set. And what I mean by this is research when a set releases, and this is really important when you buy into a set. My philosophy, and I like to share this a lot with my audience, that I personally don't believe in chasing older sets. What I mean by that is if you are around for a specific era, let's say if you're around when Pokemon 151 released and you bought it for retail price, fantastic. Though if you're now trying to buy Pokemon 151 and you're spending whatever it is, $550, I think it's $600 for an Elite Trainer box, might be more if you're watching this video a year after release, and who knows what the price is. But I don't believe in chasing older sets and then spending that much money, even though they may double in price or triple in price in a few years. I just don't like that because you do need to fork out a bigger amount up front. What I think is awesome is buying a set when it releases and being part of that era. And also a little cool pro tip as well is researching and buying Pokemon cards that aren't really, 100 USD or 200 USD. Finding those Pokemon cards that are a little bit more fairly priced or even undervalued. And if you're interested in how to spot undervalued Pokemon cards, I do have a whole video explaining the principles of that, and you can see that video on screen right here. But if you do watch that video that's appearing right now, you're gonna really learn a lot there. Appreciate you watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.